Good afternoon. I am Dr. Rajesh Tandon, UNESCO Co-Chair on Community-Based Research and Social Responsibility in Higher Education. On behalf of my co-chair, Dr. Bud Hall, and a consortium of partners which facilitated 11 international webinars on open science, I am delighted to be able to participate in this UNESCO webinar on Indigenous knowledge. These 11 webinars from the Pacific to Latin America, Africa to Southeast Asia, North America to Europe, everywhere resonated with the demand for valuing and acknowledging indigenous knowledge. Local knowledge, experiential knowledge, knowledge linked to the lives and cultures of indigenous people around the world. I am particularly grateful to UNESCO for initiating such a consultation which focuses on opening science to other forms of knowledge systems which were the dominant source of humanity's life and survival till about 500 years ago, knowledge systems which continue to keep our indigenous communities located in their land, knowledge systems which have begun to offer healing solutions to society around the world during this very difficult pandemic period of coronavirus. The knowledge of herbal medicines, the knowledge of use of local agricultural and forest products as food, the knowledge of water, oceans and lands has been significantly relied upon by households and communities, not just from indigenous parts, in the treatment and prevention of the impact of coronavirus pandemic. Therefore, we need to find practical steps which incentivize the integration of indigenous knowledge with the hitherto dominant system of science. Science has evolved on the basis of instrumental rationality in order to control the resources of nature for the benefit of humanity, more like a small section of humanity. Indigenous knowledge is based on the principle of relational and longitudinal commitment which treats all living creatures as part of cohabitation with human beings. A practical step is to teach students of science stories of indigenous knowledge and how they are impacting them in their everyday life from high school onwards. Those who specialize in research in the scientific community should be exposed to the knowledge of indigenous elders by inviting them to be teachers in classrooms and by taking students of a wide variety of disciplines to indigenous habitations on land, in forest and on sea in order to learn experientially the reality of those theories and concepts. Funding of research should be carried out which simultaneously incentivizes research in indigenous knowledge along with the modern science. In fact, integration of the two should be encouraged through funding streams which focus on the same research question being addressed together from two different knowledge systems. It is also important that academic institutions demonstrate their commitment to indigenous knowledge by respecting and valuing its contribution to the place where they are located. We know that knowledge solutions are essentially place-based. Despite our urge to universalize knowledge, solutions to improve our lives are place-based, and all science institutions and science researchers should be taught to acknowledge that. In building the protocols for ethics and review of ethical practices, it is important that indigenous knowledge protocols are integrated. Some countries and some indigenous communities have developed their own ethical protocols which need to be taught to students of science around the world, irrespective of whether they are coming from indigenous communities or not. And finally, indigenous scholars, researchers should be supported to translate their own cultural and linguistic storehouse of knowledge into the dominant European languages currently being used in science. It is important to acknowledge that language is the carrier of knowledge and culture is the storehouse from where it comes. Indigenous languages, therefore, must be supported through research grants and translation so that learning of indigenous knowledge can be mainstreamed in teaching of science. These practical arrangements can be incorporated in the recommendations of open science that UNESCO makes to its member states this year. We hope that open science will, from now on, learn to be open to all forms of knowledge, in particular to indigenous knowledge. Thank you very much.